At exactly noon, silence wrapped the Harrington mansion like a silk ribbon, broken only by the faint clinking of china on marble. Clara Harrington, the 16-year-old daughter of one of the most powerful men in the state, lifted a crystal glass of orange juice toward her lips with the careless grace of youth. In that instant, Maya Carter, the nanny whom everyone treated like wallpaper, felt her body move before her mind could catch up. "Don't drink that!" she screamed, the sound ricocheting through the vaulted ceilings like a shotgun blast. She slapped the glass from Clara's hand, juice splattering across the white Italian leather sofa that cost more than Maya's entire annual salary. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Victoria Harrington surged to her feet, eyes ablaze. "How dare you strike my daughter?" Edward Harrington, the patriarch, folded his newspaper with deliberate calm, his voice heavy with menace. "Maya, you have 10 seconds to explain yourself before I call security." Clara clutched her wrist, eyes wide, more from shock than pain. Maya stood trembling yet unyielding, pointing at the shards of crystal on the floor where the liquid pooled in the unnatural shimmer. "It smells wrong. The color is off. Please, just look at it." The air thickened as if the walls themselves held their breath. Edward crouched, inhaled, and for the first time his face drained of certainty. "Clara," he asked quietly, "who gave you this juice?" "Grandmother Margaret," the girl whispered. "She said it was a special recipe." A hush fell, deeper than silence. The room was no longer a sanctuary, but a stage where loyalty, suspicion, and hidden venom collided. Now the question hangs for you, the listener. If you stood where Maya stood, accused of madness while knowing you just saved a life, what would you do? The echo of Maya's scream still clung to the ornate walls long after the shattered glass was swept away, leaving a faint citrus scent mingled with something far more sinister. The Harrington mansion was not merely a home. It was a fortress of marble and steel, a shrine to wealth and status, every hallway whispering of privilege, accumulated through decades of construction contracts and political favors. To outsiders, it radiated untouchable elegance, but to those within, it was a gilded cage, every relationship tightened by chains of expectation and fear. Edward Harrington, the patriarch, had built an empire brick by brick, a man whose handshake determined the fate of entire city blocks. His presence filled every room he entered, a mix of silent calculation and unshakable authority. Victoria, his wife, lived for appearances, her world measured in brand names and society columns. She had mastered the art of smiling at charity galas while slicing her enemies with words sharp as glass. To her, staff were tools, replaceable and undeserving of respect. And Maya's sudden defiance was an unforgivable crack in the flawless surface she fought to maintain. Clara, their teenage daughter, stood at the fragile crossroads of innocence and rebellion. She had inherited her father's sharp mind, but carried her mother's loneliness, forever watched yet rarely listened to. The juice she nearly drank symbolized more than danger. It was a reminder of how exposed she was, even within the supposed safety of her family's walls. Then there was Margaret Harrington, Edward's 80-year-old mother, a woman whose frail appearance disguised a mind like coiled wire. She was the architect of the family's traditions, the keeper of its darkest secrets, and the shadow behind every decision. For years, she had treated Maya as if she were invisible, yet now her name lingered in the air like a storm cloud. And at the center stood Maya Carter, 32, her uniform plain, her salary meager, her voice often ignored. She had entered the mansion 2 years earlier with the quiet resignation of someone accustomed to invisibility. But in that moment when she struck the glass from Clara's hand, she transformed from background to lightning rod. She was no longer just the nanny. She was the unwelcome witness. The household staff knew their place, whispering among themselves in the servants' quarters about the scandal that had unfolded in the great hall. The gardener recalled hushed conversations he had overheard between Margaret and the family lawyer about altering the will. The cook remembered how Margaret never once stepped foot in the kitchen, making her sudden interest in preparing juice for Clara seem more like theater than affection. In this house, every detail was layered, every smile hiding intent, every silence carrying weight. Maya could feel the walls watching her, the family portrait eyes painted centuries ago seeming to accuse her of trespassing into matters reserved for bloodlines. Edward's hesitation to dismiss her outright was not mercy, but calculation. A man like him weighed risks, like figures in a ledger, and the unusual shimmer in that juice made him pause. Victoria, however, was relentless. To her, Maya's action was humiliation made public, and she would not rest until the nanny was expelled, her reputation shredded like confetti at a gala. Clara remained caught in between, torn between gratitude for her life and loyalty to the mother who demanded obedience. And Margaret simply watched, her lips pressed into the faintest smile, as if this chaos was nothing more than the next move in a long game if only she understood. The Harrington mansion had become a chessboard, its polished floors reflecting not just wealth but also strategy, betrayal, and fear. Maya, once considered a pawn, had just made the opening move of a game she never asked to play. The question was not whether the Harringtons would strike back, but how, and how much truth the walls of that mansion could hold before they collapsed under the weight of their own secrets. Long after the echoes of that fateful afternoon faded, Maya found herself alone in the modest apartment above the garage, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun in slow, uneven circles. The Harrington mansion had tried to consume her like it had consumed so many others, pressing her into silence, reducing her existence to uniforms and duty rosters. But Maya was not born into silence. She had been forced into it. Her earliest memories were of foster homes where voices were weapons and footsteps on the stairs meant danger. She had survived by memorizing every detail, every glance, every mood swing of the adults around her. While other children clung to toys, Maya clung to patterns. She knew which cupboard door creaked, which floorboard betrayed footsteps, which excuses softened a drunk foster parent's rage. That memory, sharp as glass and permanent as ink, became her only armor. At 16, she had thought she had finally broken free. A scholarship to a private academy promised a different life, but freedom slipped away as easily as it had arrived. She was accused of stealing a gold watch, humiliated in front of her classmates, and expelled. Weeks later, the watch turned up in the backpack of her accuser, but the stain on her reputation remained. It was the first time Maya learned that truth was fragile when weighed against privilege. At 22, she tasted injustice again. Working at a medical clinic, she earned the trust of families, but trust turned to ash when the doctor's jealous wife spread rumors of an affair. She lost her job overnight. No one asked for her side. No one cared. Each humiliation carved a lesson deeper into her skin. People with power could rewrite reality, and people like her were expected to disappear. Yet she did not disappear. Instead, she honed her skill of remembering, filing away conversations, gestures, documents glimpsed in passing. She became a human ledger, storing the unspoken transactions of life around the wealthy. When she entered the Harrington mansion, she carried that silent power with her, unnoticed, like a shadow trailing light. For 2 years, she was treated like a piece of furniture, unseen but always present, and in that invisibility, she saw everything. She remembered Edward's tense phone call with a real estate developer about expropriating land as long as certain people remained silent. She remembered Victoria whispering into her phone about medical test results that must never be revealed. She remembered Margaret arguing with the family accountant over offshore accounts that needed cleansing before a tax audit. Each detail was tucked into her mind like a bead on a rosary, ready to be recited when the time came. That night, after saving Clara's life, she opened her laptop and began typing with the fury of a woman who had swallowed silence too long. Names, dates, fragments of overheard conversations, the scent of fear in Victoria's voice, the tremor in Edward's when he thought no one was listening. It all poured onto the screen until she had 42 pages of notes. It was not accusation. It was a record. It was not revenge. It was survival. The ringing phone at 2 in the morning shattered her focus. Margaret's voice drifted down the line, sugar-coated, dripping with poison. Maya, dear, it's clear this household is no longer the right fit for you. We'll provide references, of course, but Maya's voice was steady, even amused. Before I leave, perhaps we should discuss those conversations about the Cayman Islands, or the documents Dr. Morrison left on the dining table, or the Kuala land meetings you held in front of me as if I were invisible. Silence crackled across the line, heavy as a storm gathering. For the first time, Margaret's mask of fragile sweetness slipped, replaced by the hiss of a predator caught off guard. In that silence, Maya understood her greatest strength, the gift of memory sharpened by years of injustice, now weaponized against the very people who had underestimated her. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Harrington mansion, gilding the breakfast table in warm light that felt almost cruel in its cheerfulness. For Maya, the brightness only illuminated the shadows pressing in from every side. She had barely closed her eyes after Margaret's late-night call when the knock came at her door. Two men in tailored suits stood like statues on the porch, one tall and severe, the other with a smirk that never touched his eyes. They carried papers heavy with accusations: extortion, blackmail, invasion of privacy. Maya read the words and felt her stomach twist, but she refused to flinch. This was the Harrington way. Rewrite the story, cast the servant as the villain, bend the truth until it snapped under the weight of their wealth. Within hours, the whispers began to spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. An unstable nanny, a dangerous woman, someone who attacked a child in a jealous rage. Interview appointments evaporated, landlords received anonymous calls questioning her morality, and doors that had been half open slammed shut with finality. Victoria spearheaded the campaign with the precision of a general waging war. At the country club, she lamented to friends about the tragic decline of standards in domestic help, her crocodile tears ensuring the story leapt from gossip to gospel. Edward worked behind the scenes, using his network of contacts to dig into Maya's past, feeding investigators a narrative carefully crafted to destroy her credibility. He demanded records, financial histories, testimonies from long-forgotten neighbors. Margaret, ever the puppeteer, remained publicly silent, allowing her son and daughter-in-law to do the dirty work while she cultivated the mask of a frail old woman, horrified by the betrayal of someone she had welcomed into her home. Clara, the girl whose life Maya had saved, became the cruelest cut of all. When Maya saw her across the street days later, the teenager's eyes were red from crying, but when Maya lifted a hand to wave, Clara turned away, her face hard with practiced indifference. Someone had poisoned the child's heart, and Maya felt the sting as sharply as any blade. It was the familiar story repeating itself. Powerful voices drowning out truth, the innocent forced to swallow lies. Yet this time was different. Maya was no longer the frightened girl expelled from school, nor the young woman discarded by jealous rumor. This time she had evidence. She had memory. She had truth carved into 42 pages that could not be erased by whispers or lawsuits. Sitting alone on the park bench where she once took Clara to play, she remembered the words she had muttered years earlier. When they cannot attack your actions, they attack your character. The pattern was as old as her life, but patterns could be broken. Rage flared inside her chest, not the blind rage of despair, but the controlled burn of resolve. She would not allow the Harringtons to dictate her story. If they wanted to paint her as the villain, she would hold up the mirror and show the world who the true villains were. That night, as she locked her apartment door against the threats pressing closer, she began to sort her notes with renewed determination. She organized them into categories: financial fraud, medical manipulation, land theft, and finally, attempted murder. She cross-referenced dates with phone logs she remembered, matched overheard conversations with public events, tied whispered names to faces glimpsed in newspaper photos. Her life had been reduced to ashes by false accusations before, but now she had kindling enough to start a fire that could burn down the entire Harrington empire. She understood that the next move was not to hide, but to step into the open at precisely the right time, with precisely the right allies. And as she placed the last page neatly atop the growing stack, she whispered to herself, steady and certain, they have underestimated the wrong woman. The call came on a Tuesday night, just as Maya was sifting through her notes for the 100th time, her small desk lamp casting a lonely glow on the stacks of paper that had become her lifeline. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, and for a moment she almost ignored it, wary of another trap. But instinct urged her to answer. Maya Carter? The voice was male, firm but not threatening, carrying the weight of experience. My name is Daniel Pierce. I'm an investigative journalist with the Herald Tribune. I received an anonymous tip about irregularities involving the Harrington family, and your name was mentioned. Maya froze. Her heart pounded as suspicion warred with hope. How do I know you're who you say you are? She demanded. Daniel chuckled lightly, a sound weary but genuine. Google me, 20 years covering corporate corruption, Pulitzer Prize in 2018 for a series on organ trafficking in private hospitals. It wasn't pretty, but it was necessary. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, and within seconds she found him. Dozens of articles, fearless exposés, photographs of a man with salt and pepper hair and eyes that seemed to look straight through lies. He was real. More than that, he was credible. Why are you calling me? She asked, her voice tight. Because someone told me you witnessed something that could topple one of the most powerful families in the country, Daniel replied. And if even half of what I've heard is true, your information might be the missing piece the FBI has been waiting for. At the mention of the FBI, Maya's breath caught. She had suspected larger forces were circling, but to hear it confirmed felt like the ground shifting beneath her feet. For the next 2 hours, she poured out her story, detail after detail, as Daniel listened with the patience of a man accustomed to unraveling lies. He interrupted only to ask sharp, specific questions. Dates, times, the exact wording of whispered conversations. That proved he was not chasing gossip, but building a case. With every answer, Maya felt both lighter and more exposed, as if handing over pieces of herself. When she finished, Daniel was silent for a long moment, then spoke with quiet conviction. Maya, what you've endured is unimaginable. But what you've seen, what you've remembered, could save countless lives. The Harrington Corporation has been under federal investigation for 6 months. Money laundering, corruption in government contracts, and now, thanks to you, we may have proof of something even darker. They've been fixing bids, funneling millions through shell companies. And if the organ trafficking angle is real, this isn't just white-collar crime. This is human suffering on a scale that shocks even me. Maya's hands trembled, though her voice held steady. But they have lawyers, money, influence. I'm just a nanny with no job, no reputation left. Daniel's answer came without hesitation. So was David against Goliath. The key isn't size, it's precision. You have the weapon they never expected. The truth, documented through eyes they dismissed as irrelevant. You've been invisible to them, and that invisibility is your advantage. For the first time in days, Maya felt a flicker of something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Over the following week, she and Daniel established a routine of cautious meetings in quiet cafes, exchanging information in whispers over half-empty coffee cups. Daniel validated her notes with sources inside the FBI, cross-checking her recollections against documents already seized in secret raids. The puzzle pieces fit too neatly to be coincidence. Offshore accounts matched dates Maya had overheard. Names she had scribbled down appeared in ongoing indictments. Every fact she carried in her mind became a nail in the Harringtons' coffin. Yet with progress came danger. Victoria spread new rumors. Edward tightened surveillance. Margaret sent veiled threats through polished lawyers. Maya's world shrank to shadows and whispers, but now she was no longer alone. Daniel was her ally, a man who believed in her when everyone else tried to erase her. They underestimated you, he said one evening as they parted ways on a rain-slicked street. That's their fatal mistake. They thought you were furniture. But furniture doesn't take notes. Furniture doesn't remember. And furniture sure as hell doesn't bring down empires. As Maya walked home, rain soaking through her thin coat, she repeated his words silently, letting them anchor her. For the first time, the fight ahead felt not just survivable, but winnable. She was not powerless. She was the storm the Harringtons never saw coming. The night Clara called, her voice shook with both fear and determination, the kind of trembling born not from weakness, but from the weight of unbearable truth. Meet me at midnight by the back gate, she whispered. I have something you need to see. Maya barely had time to steady her breathing before the appointed hour arrived. She slipped through the darkened streets, her heart hammering against her ribs, until the looming shadow of the Harrington mansion appeared against the moonlit sky. Clara was waiting, a backpack slung over her small shoulders, her eyes red from crying, yet burning with resolve. Without a word, she opened the pack and revealed the treasures she had stolen from the family safe. Hard drives, flash drives, ledgers, medical files, voice recorders. Evidence, raw and damning. They didn't try to kill me because of the will, Clara whispered, her voice breaking. It's worse. I found the falsified medical records in Grandma's office. They let people die waiting for organs while selling compatibility to the highest bidder. I heard Father say 50 million in hospital donations was siphoned away. I have recordings, Maya. Everything. They sat together on the cold garden bench where Clara had once played as a child, the innocence of memory tainted by the horror of revelation. For 3 hours, Clara poured out secrets that would shatter the Harrington empire. When Daniel arrived with 2 federal agents, the garden transformed into a command post. The agents scanned files, cross-checked bank statements, confirmed signatures. Their faces grew graver with every page. This isn't just corruption, one of them muttered. It's systematic genocide hidden under the mask of philanthropy. The decision was made then and there. The evidence had to be revealed publicly before the Harringtons could destroy it. Can you go live with this? Maya asked Daniel, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Daniel's lips curled into a determined smile. At 6 in the morning, Edward Harrington will be watching the news with his breakfast. That's when we'll strike. Hours passed in a blur of preparation. At 5:45 a.m., federal agents swarmed the mansion in silence, their boots crunching on gravel, their warrants ready. By 6 a.m., the entire nation was watching live footage of the Harrington dynasty unravel. Edward, still in his silk pajamas, was yanked from his bed, his wrists snapped into handcuffs before his mind could comprehend the reversal of power. "This is absurd," he shouted, his face red with fury. "You have no evidence." But the cameras rolling outside told a different story. Boxes of documents carried into waiting vans, servers dismantled, priceless art seized as proceeds of crime. Patricia fainted in the hallway, her carefully curated world collapsing with a single thud. Margaret was dragged from her room as she tried to burn papers in the fireplace, her frail mask stripped away to reveal the venom beneath. "You don't know your place," she screamed at the agents, her shrill voice echoing down the corridors that had once bent to her command. The charges were read calmly, without haste: conspiracy, organ trafficking, money laundering, attempted murder. The words struck harder than any weapon, unraveling decades of arrogance in a matter of minutes. Meanwhile, at the television studio, Daniel Pierce delivered the biggest broadcast of his career. His voice steady as images of the raid alternated with Maya's testimony, Clara's recordings, and documents displayed for the nation to see. "Exclusive," the headline blared. "Billionaire family exposed an international organ trafficking scheme." Maya sat beside him, no longer the invisible nanny, but the reluctant heroine whose courage had torn down a dynasty. Across the country, people stopped in their tracks. Commuters frozen before televisions and train stations, families silenced at breakfast tables, hospital staff clutching each other as they realized their lost patients had been victims of greed. On Wall Street, Harrington construction stock plummeted by 80% in 2 hours, the empire crumbling in real time. For Maya, the victory was not in the spectacle, but in the quiet knowledge that the truth could no longer be buried. As she watched Edward led away in chains, Margaret hurling curses, Patricia sobbing into her hands, she felt not triumph, but a deep, steady satisfaction. Justice had finally stepped through the gilded doors of the Harrington mansion, and this time it would not leave empty-handed. 6 months later, the storm had settled, but its echoes remained. Edward Harrington now sat behind prison walls, sentenced to 45 years for crimes so monstrous that even his wealth could not soften the iron bars. Margaret, once the matriarch who ruled with a smile like a knife, would spend the rest of her life in custody, stripped of her illusions of superiority. Patricia, spared prison by lack of evidence, found herself abandoned by society, working as a receptionist in a shabby clinic, her designer gowns replaced by polyester uniforms. Clara, no longer a fragile teenager, had grown into a young woman of courage, speaking publicly about domestic workers' rights and testifying before Congress, her voice shaking but unbroken. And Maya Carter, once invisible, now stood in the light. She had received the National Civil Courage Award, offered scholarships by universities she never dared dream of attending, and been hired as a consultant for federal agencies who finally recognized the power of her gift. Her greatest triumph, however, was not the applause or the accolades. It was a nonprofit she founded, a sanctuary for whistleblowers trapped in silence, giving them the protection she had once been denied. Standing at the podium of a crowded auditorium, Maya spoke with calm conviction. For years, I believed being ignored meant I had no worth. But invisibility is not weakness. It is a vantage point. The Harringtons fell because they never realized someone they dismissed as furniture was watching, listening, remembering. Their arrogance destroyed them. My hope is that others in positions like mine will realize their silence can become their strength. Their memories can become weapons against injustice. The audience rose in a standing ovation, but Maya's eyes sought Clara's in the crowd, the girl she had once saved and who had, in turn, saved her with courage beyond her years. Together, they embodied the truth that power does not always wear a suit or a crown. Sometimes it wears a simple uniform, carries scars from a hard life, and yet dares to speak when no one else will. Invisible does not mean harmless. It means underestimated, and being underestimated is the sharpest blade of all. Now I turn the question to you. If injustice unfolded in front of you, would you remain silent or would you risk everything to speak the truth? Leave your answer below. Your voice matters more than you think.